I'm going to get the newspaper where it's wet. This is about the consistency you want it, right here. It's wet. You can squeeze some water out of it. A lot of people in other climates, they don't use it that wet. This Hawaii stuff evaporates pretty quick over here. So we have a little bit of a different rule in this kind of hot weather. So you use it a little moisture than you normally would. You have it no matter what at the bottom of your bin. You have a hole down here so you can never get too much water. And it'll drain out anyway. So this is the consistency of the newspaper. What we're going to do right now is we're getting some fresh newspaper ready that we had shredded. We're wetting it down. We're going to put it in a bucket for now. And we're going to separate it so we can get more worms going and throw them in the fresh bedding. And then we'll stick that fresh bedding back into the bin. And we'll take the stuff that we separated out, which we'll put in another bucket with eggs and stuff in it, and we're going to seed different places around the area with that right now. So those will hatch out into the surrounding area. We keep doing this, we keep doing this, we keep doing this. Within about 6 months, exponentially the growth rate. They're going to be everywhere and we're not going to be able to stop them. So any place we drop a papaya or a banana peel, they're going to come up and eat it right away, take it right back into the soil. We're making them our workers, our tillers. So they're our farm workers basically. So the reason I want this in the bright sun here, because I want to scare the worms down into the pile. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dump this out on the table, and I'm going to make it into different piles, and the worms will get chased down to the bottom of it. This is kind of a strange bin. I experimented with this and I did a bunch of different things to it. I threw a water plant in here because I wanted to see just how much biomass they can handle, and they love it. This is called choy. A lot of the Filipinos eat this. And I threw probably a mass 10 times the size of this in here a week ago. It's slowed down, but this is what they've turned it into in about a week, eating it. Almost pure dirt in itself right there. And this is the fatida again. And so what we're going to do is we're going to, first off, we're going to save this. And this is what we're going to let them seed back into. And this will be their main food source when we put them back into this, along with some of the newspaper they have here already. We're going to keep the stuff that's really intact, which is the fresh stuff I put in there. We're going to leave that in here for where we put them at. And this is what we're going to separate them out of right here in the bottom of the bin. These worms have been in here about 2 months. There was nothing but shredded newspaper in here and little bits of compost that we added. You see the holes in the bottom of the bin for it to drain? Okay. Now this is going to be a little stinky. The reason it's a little bit stinky is it's not finished. Slightly anaerobic for the time being, which is fine. Just about. At this stage, there's still a lot of egg cases in it. These are egg cases. You see these yellow lemon looking things? That is a worm egg case. That has about 20 worms in it. Each one of these worms lays 1 a week once they come into breeding. These worms will be mature to breed out of this egg case in 30 days. 30 days to 60 days, they'll be ready to breed. So each one of them will have 20 babies a week. So you can imagine the growth rate and how it goes on. So what I'm doing is right now, while this is at this stage and I have tons of worm casing eggs in there, I'm going to separate the worms out of this, and I'm going to put this in a bin with some fresh newspaper and let all these eggs hatch. And then let them eat the rest of this. Just leave it alone. Then I'll separate it again and throw those all in with here as well. So basically what we're doing is we're making a fresh place for them. So now the stuff I threw in the bucket here, I'm going to throw it back into the bin here so they have a good, solid, fresh area. And the reason I'm doing it in the levels I put in the bucket is this is going to be their food source for now right here. I'm not really going to throw them any more food besides that in there. I'm going to let them eat that down. And so what we're going to do is we're going to cover that with some newspaper here. Set the piles in the bright sunlight. Wait a few minutes. It don't look like they're really moving fast. But inside that pile, they're all burrowing for the center right now. So what we'll do with these piles is the more sunlight on them is the better. They run from the sunlight. We're going to keep making the piles into little pyramids here. And these guys are going to shoot for the bottom. I'm going to do another pile with this one. And now we kind of just got to wait it out a little while. We can pick the ones off the edges if we want, like this, where there's big masses of them. But I'm trying to get worms pretty much without their compost so they get a really good solid start on the new newspaper. And then you guys will be able to monitor this, a fresh bed, how long it takes them to eat that into dirt as well. So you don't really notice, but these guys have been moving, even though we don't notice a lot. Sometimes I'll do this. I'll flake it to the side. I'll just keep taking worms off the top as I flake it. The more I move it, they feel that as well. They're having a hard time moving out. Throwing the worms back in the major pile, let them go down the bottom. Now this, which is loaded with worm eggs in it, is going to start its own new culture. You see all the little caplets right there, all the little yellow things that look like little lemons. 1, 2, 3 right here. 4 of them. Oh, there's tons of them. These are all worm eggs. So what that means is my worms are super healthy and really doing a lot of breeding right now because the ratio of worm eggs in here is really high. So now what this goes into is fresh bedding. The worms are going to hatch, go into the fresh bedding and this stuff, and I'm just going to leave it for another month and a half. And by the time we come in there, it'll be pure black stuff and it'll be loaded with more worms than were in here. By the time we break these guys open, the same thing's going to happen again and again. And so once you have like a lot of them, doubling them is gigantic. And we have a lot of eggs in here. Probably about as much eggs as I've seen in any one of my bins at one time. You can just see them spread out everywhere in it. Everywhere I look, I just, when I turn it over, I see these lemon-shaped little dots. They're mostly hidden from us underneath the other dirt, but I see lots and lots of them. And we're getting to the bottom. You notice the density right here already? As we get to the bottom and we start to flake out, they don't even look like they're moving all that much. But they are. Then once you get to this point, what you do is this. You start folding the pile up onto itself at the very last stages. You don't give them much room around the bottom, and they're all going to congregate into the center. When they sell you worms, this little pile right here in front of me, normal worm rate, you'd be paying about 70 bucks for this many worms right here. Now I want to actually show you guys the center of the pile now, just to see what's actually happened.
Whoa.
That's crazy.
So you don't really see them moving, but now you can kind of see what's going on in that pile as I flake it up. So the bottoms of all the piles will have the bulks of the worms like that. And if you look in the there's actually still tons more of these egg castings in here everywhere. And I want to show you that in the sunlight because one of these might be a really good shot of it. And I haven't seen too many really good shots of it. I don't know if you can see that very well on the tip of my finger. But that's an egg casing, and that contains between 2 and 20 worms, all depending on the species and the fertility. So that's what makes the whole thing work. That's the actual egg of the worm. Because that's what we really need to do. We need to add the worms back into the major agricultural infrastructure around us, instead of all the inert dead soil that we have. So you can come to this farm and you can add things, or you can add nothing, and you can pull out of the ground. But what we really want to see is sustainability and people putting back in and knowing that it is a give and take situation. That's the flaw of agriculture. Big money agriculture, they come in, they add, they don't really add, they take, and then when they leave the ground where it doesn't really grow anything anymore, it's inert. So what we're taking is a piece that's been grown on for so many years, it's basically inert matter, and we're adding life to it. And the way we're adding life to it is with these worms right here, fish water, oxygen, and the types of plants that we grow around it. There's so much eggs in here. If there's 10 cases and they got 20 each, that's 200 worms. So one tiny little handful in a pile like this, like I showed you earlier, that's all I put in one of those piles. A couple months later, it's hundreds and hundreds of worms. Not to mention, it also attracts other worms that are present already in the gulches. They smell the castings. So I can take one little handful like this and seed it until this entire place is seeded and the worm populations have grown this way. So that's what's really, really beautiful about this. These guys are all happy. They're going into a brand new condominium. As they move down into the newspaper, we'll take some of this castings right off the top as well. And we'll throw that into the other bucket with the other stuff we have. So this is basic separation of worms.